Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining us for the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association's webinar series. Today's educational webinar is on new market tax credits, creating economic health and prosperity in partnership with the Native American Agricultural Fund. Gorecki kaitawa haupa, du shinome kutu tuwitsa kohayohano, eshte. My name is Bianca Mitchell, and I am the Education Manager for IANTA. IANTA provides technical assistance and training to tribal nations and Native-owned enterprises engaged in tourism, hospitality, and recreation. Our mission is to define, introduce, grow, and sustain American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian tourism that honors traditions and values. Part of our programming includes agritourism, which is located at the intersection between tourism and agriculture. It involves the packaging of tourism-related product and services within agricultural-based operation or activity for the primary purpose of providing enjoyment, education, or agribusiness expertise and practices for the public. Below, find carefully curated resources for tribal producers looking to create or expand their own agritourism enterprises. According to the 2017 Census of Agriculture, the United States is home to nearly 80,000 Native American or Alaska Native farm producers. Although that number represents just 2.3% of the country's 3.4 million producers, Native-owned farm acreage makes up more than 6% of the total U.S. farmland, 59 million acres to be exact. With more than 80% of Native farmers living on their farm or ranch and or reporting farming ranching as their primary occupation, an increasing number of producers are looking to grow their revenue by diversifying their product offerings. For more information, please visit our website at ianta.org to learn more about our education program offerings and our upcoming webinar series. As a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A or chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Again, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, New Market Tax Credits, Creating Economic Health and Prosperity. I also want to thank the Native American Agricultural Fund for supporting this webinar today. I am pleased to introduce you to our speakers for today. Today we have Veronica R. Lane. She is Dene. She's the Vice President and Business Development Officer for the Native American Bank. She has worked in finance and banking industry her entire career. Prior to joining NAB in 2014, Veronica primarily worked in corporate America for various organizations ranging from a small startup wealth management firm to a Fortune 500 company. Veronica joined NAB as a commercial credit analyst and has since transitioned to the lending department, where she manages a diverse commercial lending portfolio with areas of expertise in several government guarantee programs. She is also the tribal housing specialist for the bank and a member of the NAB marketing team. Veronica is a graduate of Fort Lewis College with a bachelor's in accounting and a minor in small business management and entrepreneurship. She is also a graduate of the University of Denver with a master's of business administration with a finance concentration. Veronica, originally from Toluca, New Mexico, but currently resides in Denver, Colorado. Thanks for being here, Veronica. And Brian Gorecki. He's a real estate consultants, which was established in January of 2008. The focus of real estate consultants is to assist in the development, planning, and financing of real estate. Brian brings a depth of development experience using new markets, tax credits, and a long list of national partners to assist in the development process. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Brian. Thank you, Brian, for being here with us today.
Well, Bianca, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be talking to members of IANTA. I'm really excited about talking about new market tax credits. I know for a lot of people, new market tax credits is a difficult topic and one that brings a lot of complexity. So hopefully today we're going to be able to kind of shed some of that complexity and give you the basics of how the new market tax credit program works. If you wouldn't mind, Bianca, first slide, please. Just a real quick introduction to myself. I have been in the real estate world for a little over 25 years. I started my career working in nonprofits and have continued to work with nonprofits over the last 25 years. I cut my teeth in the real estate world doing low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, and then later on in life went on to discover new market tax credits, and that has been the primary focus of my business over the last 15 years. I'm the president of Real Estate Consultants, started it back in 2008, as Bianca mentioned. I focus on new market tax credit projects throughout the United States. I've worked in 26 out of the 50 states here in the country. And I do specialize in harder, more difficult projects to get across the line. It's just something that I have been just kind of focused on over my career. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick summary of projects that I've done, just to give people just kind of a general scope of the type of projects that I've worked on in different parts of the country. You know, the very first one, and we're going to do a case study on this, is the Red Lake grocery store in Red Lake, Minnesota. That's a tribal project. I thought that would be of most interest to the group. But you can see there's a number of different organizations here. You can kind of get a general sense. The vast majority of these are nonprofits. That's where my specialty has been. Most nonprofits don't have any type of real estate background. That's not what they do. So hiring a consultant like me makes sense to help them weave them through the technical side of the new market tax credit process and give them the best possible representation and hopefully the best product at the end of the day. Next slide, please. So we thought we'd start off with a question so we have a general understanding of where people might land as it relates to just the understanding and basics of new market tax credits. So as you see here, we've put up a little poll, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of taking a moment to answer it, and we'll give the overall answers to everybody so we can kind of know where the general audience is. Next slide, please. That's a pretty good thing. Brand new. 50% is brand new. That's great. Next slide, if you don't mind. One of the things I like to do at the beginning of the presentation is give you a general understanding of what the takeaway is going to be here, hopefully after a 30-minute presentation here on the new market tax credit side. First and foremost, is your project eligible? That's a key piece that we need to know, and we're going to talk about that next. Then just give you the general basics of new market tax credit so you have a working understanding of it. I think a good thing that I ask all my potential clients is, does new markets, is it a good fit for you? Does it make sense for you? So that's something we're going to talk a little bit about. Can you do this on your own? Do you need a consultant? You know, we're going to talk a little bit about the allocation process of the new markets. And then lastly, and this is a key component to just the general understanding of new markets, is what are the community benefits? Why are community benefits important? And how do we share that story of the community benefits of the project? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Next slide, Bianca. So we're going to start off with, how is my project eligible? So the way the program works is census tracts are done every 10 years. We know that. We do that on the top of the year. So we just completed our 2020 census tract. And through that, we have census tracts that are deemed eligible. So if anybody has a project that they're looking at, I encourage you to go to this website right here, the cohnresnick.com New Market Tax Credit Map. And you can use this anytime. Save this in your web browser, and this is something that you can use for future references on particular projects. Put in your address, spell out the address fully, don't use any abbreviations, and then you click Finder. And what this is going to show you, it's going to show you your map, and it's going to give you 3 color codes. It's going to give you dark blue, which is severely distressed, which on the vast majority of tribal reservations, you're going to find most of the tribal area is going to be severely distressed. Eligible, which is the light blue, and then usually a dark gray comes up for non-eligible. So this is a key piece for you to understand, because if you're not in the first two, highly distressed or eligible, you are not eligible for new market tax credits. The other piece that it's going to show you is whether you're in a urban or a rural district. This is important because many of the CDEs, community development entities, these are the entities, these are the organizations that receive the tax credits and are looking to put them in your project. They're going to distinguish themselves usually between urban or rural, or a mix. Some of them will say we're going to do 60% urban projects, 40% rural, or they're going to flip that. Some will say 60% rural, 40% urban. And that's a key distinction that you need to know. And then lastly, underserved states. So what the federal government has done is said they've picked 10 states that have the least number of new market tax credit dollars going into it by population. So you kind of see a couple of states here kind of stick out. The ones I point out to are California, Florida, and Texas. Those are huge states with huge populations. If they get the same number of projects equal to my state, which is Minnesota, guess what? Minnesota has a really small population compared to California, Florida, or Texas. So that's how those three states, amongst the other 7 that are listed there, are listed as underserved states. And the reason why I bring this up is because that bumps you up on the list for CDEs, community development entities, when they're looking at what projects that they're going to fund. So if you're in an underserved state that's listed here, you got a leg up. If you're potentially a rural project, which most tribal projects are, you also have a leg up. And we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Next slide, please. So here's our second question. You know a little bit about new market tax credits. I've kind of gone over it a little bit. What project do you believe would best fit the new market tax credit program as you understand it? Health and wellness center, grocery store, manufacturing plant, or all of the above? I'll let you guys answer that, and then we'll move on. You're right. D is correct. All of the above. The new market tax credit program has got a wide variety of projects that it can support. The key to it is, as I mentioned earlier, is the community benefits. And I just want to talk about community benefits just really briefly, and we'll kind of weave that more into the case study as we look at the red light grocery store. So the community benefits is, what does the project do to benefit low-income persons or the low-income communities? How does it service it? What goods and services does it bring to the community? What kind of jobs does it provide? What kind of niche does it fill? 2 critical niches that are out there in the current market are food deserts and medical deserts. And what those are is just pretty much what it sounds like. An area that doesn't have access to healthy foods, and an area that doesn't have access to health and wellness. If you find yourself in those areas and your project fits that segment, you obviously have a huge leg up on any other project that's in that state or that region as it relates to a CDE looking at your project and weighing your community benefits against other projects. Bianca, next slide, please. We're going to just talk really briefly about the new market tax credit program, just so everybody's got a basic understanding of what how the program started and what it is. So it started at the very end of the Clinton administration, as Bill Clinton was literally walking out the door the last day or the last 2 days, he signed this into law. It started in 2003. The first couple of years, the program morphed. I did my very first deal in 2005. And from then on, the program has really pretty much stayed the same. Projects have come into favor and out of favor. At one point in time, hotels were really interesting to a lot of projects. They still are in certain parts of the country. But I'll tell you, the primary focus has been on wellness, on charter schools, on manufacturing that are creating lots of jobs. So a lot of things that were hot 10 years ago are no longer hot today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. On an annual basis, every year, the federal government deploys $5 billion in new market tax credits to community development entities that are spread out across the country. The program is run through the U.S. Treasury. So myself as a new market tax credit consultant, I don't have any interaction with the U.S. Treasury. My action is with the CDEs who receive the allocation from the U.S. Treasury. The program is administered through the CDFI fund and the IRS. Next slide, please. Here's some key pieces that I want to point out that are critical to the program. And if you're thinking about a project, how you might want to be thinking about your project. So the overall program is there, and this goes to the community benefits that we were just talking about, is to help attract businesses and capital investments in low-income communities. You're going to hear me talk about low-income communities and low-income persons a lot over the next 5-10 minutes here. It also is a critical piece of needed equity for a lot of low-income or nonprofit organizations, so low-income communities and nonprofit organizations. I highlighted the next bullet point because there is a huge push within the overall program to support BIPOC projects throughout the country. So obviously tribal projects are considered BIPOC projects and are critical to for this program to continue to go on. They're looking for BIPOC projects to put their dollars into. I talked about the low-income persons in the community. We're going to talk a little bit more about the tax credit, how the tax credit investment works. It's a 7-year compliance period and how that credit gets doled out. And as I just said, at the end of the 7-year compliance period, that's where the debt is forgiven, and that's where the net benefit of the program is relayed to the tribal organizations in this case. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about Red Lake, and I'll give you a little bit of background on this particular project. For those of you who are not familiar with Minnesota and the Red Lake tribe, it's in the northern portion of Minnesota. It's one of the poorest tribe reservations in Minnesota. And it was in desperate need of healthy foods within the community. The grocery store that they did have was an old cinder block building that they had been using for the last 15 to 20 years to house their grocery store. It had no loading dock. It had little to no back of the house shelving or storage capacity. It lacked refrigeration. It had freezers that broke down on a pretty regular basis. They had no real point of sale, and what point of sale is the cash register system that allows for the people at the front desk to the front of the store to ring you out. They had little to no security, and the theft was just absolutely off the chart. They just didn't have any controls in place in order to make this a grocery store that actually could work for them. Next slide, please. So the vision here, and I give the folks that I was working with at Red Lake an enormous amount of credit. They didn't have the resources to make this happen, but they also had the ability to dream big. And the biggest thing that they wanted to do is create a grocery store that would create jobs and healthy foods for their community. And a key part of that was SuperValue, which is a very large grocery store supplier and back of the house support network. They have all the infrastructure that was needed that the tribe didn't have to operate a state-of-the-art grocery store. So that was a key component and partnership in this overall endeavor. They wanted to build a state-of-the-art grocery store. They wanted a deli. They wanted fresh meat. They wanted fresh fish. They wanted fresh produce. They wanted everything that the tribe needed to be healthy in the foods that weren't offered to them within a 50-mile radius. And so this was a critical piece. Then they also wanted to dream big and say, hey, we want to combine this with a gas station, a coffee shop, a Subway, They really wanted to be a full service operation. They wanted to kind of put their stake in the ground and say, you know, this is going to be some place that not only tribal people come to, but as people pass through, they're going to stop here because it's going to be complete, it's going to be clean, convenient, and it's going to be a place where people want to stop. Next slide, please. So the big challenges here for the tribe were they didn't really have the development expertise to make this happen. And so they reached out to me, and I reached out to other nonprofit support organizations that could help them and their staff do the necessary accounting that they would need to pull this off. They really lack the needed equity to do this, and we're going to dive into the numbers in just a little bit. We needed to secure debt on this project of close to $8 million, and Veronica is going to talk a little bit more about the role NAB played in this. The USDA guarantee was a critical piece, and USDA was a terrific partner in this overall project. The challenges were previous grocery store losses. This was not a grocery store that you could look to its last 5 years and say, wow, they're off the chart. They're making lots of money. This is a no-brainer. That wasn't the case. And there were some hiccups that we had to explain and that we had to work through. And then the last one was staff and board turnover. It's not going to surprise a lot of people that there's a lot of turnover in these organizations. And we also went through, in the very middle of the project, we went through a tribal election, which we thought could upend our project completely. It didn't, but there was, you know, we needed to work through the new board that was elected and make sure that they understood what the new market tax credit program was and how we'd be moving forward. Next slide, please. So here are the benefits, and this is really what came out of this successful project that we closed a little over 3 years ago, closing in on 4 years. So we created a fresh and healthy food environment, which has benefited the tribe substantially. Key piece with that super value partnership was better pricing, better buying power, and the ability to store and buy in bulk, which they could never do before. That was a critical piece. Capturing tribal dollars. That was one of the key secrets to this deal and how we can make this work. If anybody on the tribe wanted to go grocery shopping, they had to drive 50 miles to the nearest town. And in a winter storm, that's just wasn't going to happen. But because they could get better pricing 50 miles away, that's where the tribal members went to go do their grocery shopping. Well, we've reversed that, and we've been able to capture those dollars, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been captured on site. Shortened travel time. I just mentioned that the nearest grocery store was nearly 50 miles away. Job creation. We were able to create new jobs that we were paying over $15 an hour with benefits. And then I think this can't be understated enough, and that is the pride with which we created within the tribal community. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through at a very high level, and then we're going to look at the structure chart here. We're going to go through at a very high level how the new market tax credit program worked for the Red Lake grocery store project. You might want to jot down a couple of these numbers as you're looking at them, because when we look at the structure chart, you're going to see these numbers appear again, and it might be helpful if you have them handy. So our project was a little over 10 million. It was 10,100,000. And the way the credits work from a value basis is we were able to secure an allocation of 10 million of new market tax credits. Now that's not 10 million of cash. That's the credits that we can then go out and sell. And those credits by federal statute are worth 39%. So you take the 10 million, you multiply it by 39%, and you've got 3.9 million. Now, what do we do with 3.9 million of tax credits? Because we need the value on day one of closing, because we are going to build a grocery store, and that future stream of tax credits over 7 years doesn't do us any good. We need the money on day one. So what we're able to do is we go out and sell those tax credits to a tax credit investor. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the structure chart. But the tax credit investor on day one will pay us 80 cents on the dollar, which works out to be $3.12 million. Now, If you take the 3.12 and you subtract it from the 10 million, that gives you the leverage loan amount. That's what we needed to secure in order to make this deal work. So we had to come up with roughly $7 million of a loan, which we did with Native American Bank through the USDA loan guarantee. Now, what comes out of that 3.2 million as well are the fees that we have to pay to the CDEs. They're the ones that had the allocation and are providing that allocation to the project. We had to cover all the third-party costs, legal fees, consultants, and things of that nature. And then the project net equity is 20%. So roughly, we're getting 20% of that project. So you take 20% of 10 million, we should receive about 2 million in net benefit to the project. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a slide or two. Bianca, next slide, please. So here is a very simplified structure chart. And what I really want to help everybody understand is how the funds flow through the project. I think it's helpful that you understand the basics of the new market tax credit structure here. So I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner, and you see PNC. They were the new market tax credit investor. They're the ones who bought those credits that we talked about. They paid us the 80 cents on the dollar. They place, as you can see, they get the 3.9 million in credits, but they invest into the investment fund 3.1 million. If you see in the upper right-hand side, we have the Red Light Tribe. NAB was our lender. They put 6.8 million into the investment fund. That investment fund then makes an equity contribution down to the sub-CDE. The sub-CDE is an entity that's formed and created from the CDE entity, which is off to the right, or excuse me, off to the left there in the middle. We pay the CDE a $500,000 fee for that 10 million of allocation. And then the sub-CDE makes 2 loans to the project, a note A, which is the exact same loan we have up above, the 6.8 million. And then the B note is the 2.6, which is less the $500,000 fee we just paid. And that 2.6 is what we kind of want to keep our eye on, and that is the note that will get forgiven at the end of the 7-year compliance period. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to talk just really briefly about what the net benefit is and how it plays out at the end of the project. So you see the 3.2 at the top. Remember, we've talked about that now in a couple of different ways. We see the allocation fee we paid. We see the transaction costs that we discussed. The annual fees. So during that 7-year compliance period, there's some annual fees that we have to pay out to about $250,000. And then there's an exit fee. So at the end of 7 years, you pay $1,000 and you own that B note that we talked about. So roughly the net benefit to this project would be $2,069,000. Okay. But the interesting part about that is the interest savings that you don't see. So those interest rates that we charge for that A and B note were closer to 2.5%. Today we're charging even less. It's like 1.5 to 1.75. So if you add in that hidden fee of interest that you didn't pay on top of it, one can argue that the net benefit of the overall program is closer to 3 million than it is 2 million. Next slide, please. So the last slide we have here is just kind of an overall poll question to ask everyone, based on just a little bit of information that you just got, how interested are you? Do you have a project that you think is a good fit for a new market tax credit program for a project? And whether or not you'd be interested in learning more about the program, because we'd love to do a deeper dive on the next opportunity. And it sounds like there may be some interest on both the B and C, and that's terrific. And the last slide. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm going to turn it back over to Bianca.
All right, thank you, Brian. Just real quick before we move on to Veronica, we did have a question. What happens to the value difference between the 3.9 million allocated and the 3.12 sold to a tax investor?
That's a great question. That is the reason why the new market tax credit investor is involved in the project. So that's what they take away. So they take away that difference. That's the value they get for putting their money into the deal. And then they take that against their federal taxes over the next 7 years. Good question.
All right, and at this time, we will hand it over to Veronica. Thank you, Veronica, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Bianca. Happy to be here. And that was a great presentation by Brian. Next slide, please. As Bianca mentioned, my name is Veronica Lane. I'm the Vice President and Business Development Officer at Native American Bank. Veronica Lane Yenisha. Sitna Jinishlo Pipa 20 Bashashin. Totik Oja Dashachake is a Flana Dashanella. Next slide. To start, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on Native American Bank and the type of work that we do here. We were established in 2001 by originally 20 tribal nations and Alaska Native corporations that invested to form the bank. Currently, we have 36 shareholders, and of those 36, 31 are Native entities, meaning they are tribes, tribal enterprises, and Alaska Native corporations. We do commercial lending nationwide, so we have commercial loans ranging anywhere from Alaska all the way down to Florida. Just about over 50% of our staff represents various tribes across the country. And we have our corporate headquarters where I'm based out of, which is in Denver, Colorado. And we also have a full service branch here, and it's just located south of downtown. And then we have our flagship branch located in Browning, Montana on the Blackfeet Reservation. It's kind of the area where we originated from as a bank. And that bank is also a full service branch and the only full service bank on that reservation. Next slide, please. So on this slide, it just gives a little overview of the shareholders that we have. All 36 that I had mentioned. You'll see that we have several shareholders that are Alaska Native corporations or Alaska enterprises. And we do have 5 socially responsible shareholders, and those are non-Native shareholders that really just support our mission and the work that we do throughout Indian country. Next slide, please. This slide just shows a little bit of activity of where we provide our loans by state, and you'll see that our loan reach is really quite across the country. These are loans to tribes, tribal enterprises, Native-owned small businesses, non-Native businesses, because you actually don't have to be Native to bank with us or to receive a loan from us. So it also represents our new market tax credits program. Those are kind of centered in the states where we don't normally have reservations in some of the states. Some of those are primarily our new market loans, new market tax credits loans. And so I thought that was just a great visual representation of the type of loan that we do here at NAB. The next slide. So Brian talked a lot about the new market tax credits, and that is one of the products that we offer and that we participate in. As he mentioned, we partnered with him and the USDA on the Red Lake Trading Post grocery store. And what I want to talk about a little bit more on the Native American Bank side is to also discuss various other loan products and credit capabilities that we provide to small business owners, medium to large business owners, tribal enterprises, and tribes. So all of my presentation is just going to pretty much overview the type of loans that we provide and all of the various guarantee products that we participate and utilize to help subsidize our loan portfolio. So if we go to the next slide, please. This section, I primarily wanted to talk about loans to small businesses and really highlight one key program, which is the USDA insurance program. So for the small business loans, for us, a small business loan is anywhere upwards of $100,000. Unfortunately, we don't do a lot of microfinancing, and microfinancing is just, really small loans, less than 100,000. We provide loans to sole proprietors, LLCs, partnerships, corporations. So pretty much the full gamut of business entities. The types of loans we offer are secured term loans. What type of security that provides, it's, various. We are very familiar with different revenue streams, that might be received by tribes or organizations, and can, take a look at those. We also do secured revolving lines of credit. Those are usually AR backed. So if you're in a business that does a lot of has, a pretty significant AR, we can take a look at that as well. Our application checklist is pretty standard when compared to other application checklists, probably for other financial institutions. We are an FDIC bank, so we are regulated by the OCC, which makes, our application a little bit more stringent, and we do a lot of analysis and take a deep dive in looking at, the application and your business and your history. So we do have a formal application. We would require a business plan. And then we'll pull, credit reports for anyone who owns 20% or more of the business. We'll take a look at your personal tax returns for anyone who owns 20% or more of the business. And then really taking a look at the past 3 years of your financial statements, whether that be, internally prepared, audited, or your tax returns. We'll also ask for projections. A lot of the guarantee programs that we utilize request projections as well. And that really just is giving us a sense of how, the project that you're financing, if it's to expand your business, taking on the amount of debt that you're looking to see if your operations will cover that debt in the immediate future. Next slide, please. So the program for small businesses specifically is the BIA Insurance Guarantee Program. And we have been a preferred lender with the BIA for several years now, really have great relationships with everyone working under this guarantee program across the country, and really are expert lenders in utilizing this program. So some of the parameters of the insurance guarantee program are that you have to be located on or near the reservation or a BIA service area. For instance, Albuquerque would be a service area. All of Alaska is a service area. So that was one of the major qualifications for that insurance program. You have to be a for-profit business with at least 51% Native ownership. They have variable eligible loan uses. There are some exclusions. For instance, they don't do casino financing. I think they also don't do things related to tobacco. With this program, there is a 20% minimum equity requirement. That just means if you're a startup business, we don't do 100% financing. You would have to bring at least 20% of your own equity funds to the table. If you're an existing business, this can definitely be measured, taking a look at your balance sheet to see if we can meet this requirement in that instance. With the insurance program, it's a very specific lending range. It starts from $100,000 to $250,000. It's a very streamlined process. Depending on the loan size, we have the ability to provide the guarantee without having the BIA approve the loan, which sometimes can be really helpful in shortening the loan closing process. Usually we take about 30 days from complete application to turn around that application with a decision. And in this, using the insurance program, sometimes we don't have to wait additional days in order to get the BIA approval. And with this program, the fee is reduced for small business owners to 1%. Next slide, please. So next, I want to go over different guarantee programs that can be utilized for other business owners, and that's sort of like the mid to large business loans. Next slide, please. So some of the mid to large business loans are financing needs that are kind of in excess of $250,000. Again, we offer these types of loans to the various business entity formations, as well as tribes and tribal enterprises. We can do commercial real estate loans, equipment and leasehold improvements, again, lines of credit, business acquisition, and then financing permanent working capital. We also have other financing solutions for utilities and other tribal services. We do a lot of Title VI lending as well. I'm not going to cover that program in this presentation, but we are experts in using that program and really partnering that program with low-income housing tax credits as well. Next slide. So the first guarantee program I wanted to highlight is one that Brian had just mentioned about our partnership with him with the Red Lake Project. So the USDA program has a lot of different guarantee programs, and two of the primary ones are the business and industry, it's often referred to as BNI, and the community facilities loan guarantee program. Specifically with the Red Lake Project, we utilize the BNI guarantee program. And some of the parameters of the program are that the project, as Brian mentioned, also kind of mirrors with what the new market tax credits eligibility requires, is that this, for USDA, it has to be located in a rural area, a quick high level, qualification is it's a $50,000 population max. Can I say $1,000? Head count, sorry. And then with the USDA, the one thing that's pretty favorable for tribes and tribal enterprises is it plays well with the trust lend eligibility status, as far as if your business or your project is located on the reservation. It can be for-profit, nonprofit, tribes, native-owned businesses are all eligible. They offer eligible loan uses for various other things. There are a couple of exclusions that should be noted, is it can't be used to finance a line of credit, or goodwill is also not eligible. And then they also have certain business activities that are excluded. Depending on the status of your business or the stage of your business, the equity requirement can range anywhere from 10 to 20% with this program. And the lending range is anywhere, I kind of mirrored the lending range to match our lending range, just because the USDA has a program max of 100 million. Due to the size of our bank and what we can provide here, we go from our smallest business loan, which is 100,000, upwards to in excess of 30 million. So that's sort of the lending range that we provide here. And if you have a project that is in excess of 30 million, I would say definitely still reach out to us. We would love to have that conversation to see if it's something that we can still lead. We do partner, as in this example, with other organizations and other entities to provide loans that may be a bit larger. This loan guarantee requires USDA approval. So once we get our approval, the way the guarantee programs usually works is that we have to provide our own approval and then send the application package off to the guarantee program to have them go through their verification and approval, which usually is about 30 to 45 days. So in a whole, if you're looking at a loan approval process, that's 30 days for us, 30 to 45 days for us. So it's for the guarantee programs. So it's usually always good to keep that in mind when you're looking to finance projects. There's a 3% guarantee fee on the USDA program. If the project is located on res, right now they're offering an incentive to have that fee reduced down to 1%. And it is just a request or ask that the lender would have to do for the program. And then there's just an annual retention fee with this program. And usually what a lot of lenders do is bake that fee into the terms that are offered. Next slide, please. So the next slide is a 7A guarantee program. And with the SBA, there are various programs and guarantees as well. The primary two that we focus on, one is the 7A. So the main key point I want to point out here is SBA guarantee programs aren't really favorable if your project is located on trust status land. So if you live in an urban area or your project is located on fee simple land, this would be another great guarantee program to take a look at. It's offered to small business, for-profit businesses, native owned businesses. A lot of my portfolio in urban settings are to native business owners who live in urban areas that get to utilize this program. There's various eligible loan uses, and depending again on your business status, you could be as low as a 10% equity injection into the project up to 20%. With this guarantee program, the equity requirements are indeed cash requirements. So it's not something that can be measured based on your current balance sheet if you're in currently operating business or have existing operations. With the guarantee program, the lending range again is, this one is very specific by the program. It's $100,000 to, or I should say it's up to $5 million. And this would be an included total portfolio. So if you have several different businesses that all have 7A guaranteed loans, the SBA looks at that on a combined total affiliate basis, and you could not have more than $5 million in outstanding SBA guaranteed loans at one time. The SBA approval is required, and they tend to turn their approvals around in less than 30 days. They usually give about 2 to 3 weeks once you submit the entire checklist to their program. And they have a tiered fee structure based on the SBA 7A program. So it can range, I believe if your loan is less than $300,000 right now, there's no SBA fee. And if you exceed, I wanna say $1 million to over $1 million, it goes all the way up to 3.75% on the SBA loan amount. And this also has an annual fee as well. Next slide, please. So the 504 is another SBA loan guarantee program. Again, the project is located on fee simple land, and this other major requirement for this program is that it has to be, I believe it's 60% owner occupied. So it can't be anything that's 100% leased to a non-owner business, owner occupied business. The for-profit businesses, there are size limits with the SBA, and native owned businesses are eligible. You can do specific, so with the 504 program, it's very specific on what you can finance in order to qualify for this program. It's real estate acquisitions, FF&E, renovations and improvements, and then you can also finance your closing costs with this program. Again, depending on the use and status of your business, you can qualify for 10% to 20% equity for this program. And again, this is cash equity into the project itself, can't be measured by what's reported on your balance sheet. The 504 program has the same lending ranges. So they have a max of 5.5 million for a 504 guarantee program. The SBA approval is required. And one of the primary features of this program is the structure. So with this structure, the total project size is broken up into 3 tranches. 50% of the project is provided with a loan by the bank, so it would be us. And then depending on the equity requirement, the remaining amount is what's going to be placed with a CDC. And those CDC loans are bond structure related. So the bonds will be placed in the market, and those bonds have really favorable rates. I want to say right now it's about 1.7% if I remember correctly, and you have the option to go out for a 25-year term. And so that could be potentially on 40% of the loan would have that term. And so super low rates, super long terms. And then we would have our loan, the NAB loan at 50%. And then let's say the 10% that you were required would be the equity injection into the project. So a lot of acquisitions or business expansions utilize the 504 guarantee program just to really take advantage of the longer terms and lower rates. There is a bond debenture fee when you're placing that with the CDC, and there's an ongoing fee as well. So If we go to the next slide. The last guarantee program that I wanted to talk about is the BIA guarantee program, which might be a program that a few of you might be familiar with. And so we, as I mentioned, are experts in the BIA guarantee program. This is the full program. It's not related to the insurance program that I highlighted earlier. Again, located on or near reservations or BIA service areas. All the same eligibility requirements that I had mentioned previously. And this one also, the lending ranges sort of mirrors what we can take on at NAB. And it also I should note, there are budgets that we would have to, the program has its annual award that we'd have to also adhere to in order to qualify. This one does require a full BIA approval, so it can take about up to 30 days or 45 days to get their approval and underwriting approved as well in order to start closing the loan. This guarantee program, the fee is a little bit higher, so it's at a 2% fee. And this sort of just wraps up all of the different guarantee programs that we offer. Next slide. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of different guarantee programs. As I had mentioned before, we at Native American Bank specialize in offering guaranteed loans. It's sort of how we get to do the financing that we do within Indian country, knowing that we have unique situations or circumstances related to financing projects and on-res or on the reservation. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I didn't have any cool polling questions like Brian did, but always available and happy to talk to you in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. That's some great information. And at this time, do we have any questions for our guest speakers today, for Brian or Veronica? I know that was a lot to take in, and there were some questions through the chat. If you will all be receiving the PowerPoint slides, you will, as well as the recording of this webinar. We do have a raised hand here, John. Do you want to put your question in the chat? Let's see here. I can also allow you to talk. Okay, there's John. Do you have a question, John?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it's I was starting to type it into the question in the chat, but it's kind of long-winded. Very good presentation. I think everybody. We would like to create a tribal business, and we're thinking about Phoenix or possibly Denver. We want to create a manufacturing plant for modular buildings, and these would be for tribal housing. They would be for home developers. Essentially, they create turnkey, excuse me, modular homes for tribes, where we just truck them out to permanent foundation. They're turnkey, so they're immediately occupied. We can also do what's called flat packs. So this factory of about 30,000 square feet has 2 assembly lanes, and we can create what's again called flat packs, and these are building components. So this factory will create floor and roof trusses. These are all engineered components, in wall panels, which are called sections. So if you've probably seen apartment complexes and big buildings like that go up out of already pre-framed building components. So that's what we'd like to produce. We're working with some investors out of Houston, and what I'm envisioning is this would be a modular plant that would be owned by tribes in the area, or possibly not in the area, but it would create around 20 to 30 jobs for tribal members. And so my question might be to both the speakers, what might be a good approach or a strategy to get this off the ground? We do have a business and marketing plan. I do have, I'm architect by trade. So we have the blueprints for the building. We have the site requirements. Business plan has the equipment cost, and so we're just ready to present to potential investors, and again, hopefully tribes, thinking more Phoenix and possibly other areas out of near major cities, obviously, because of the capacity to produce these modular buildings and building components. So what this is it's a regional plant that can go into major cities, markets, but it would be nice to bring this under a tribal business or tribally controlled business that can create jobs for tribal members. Because basically,
I'll be real quick because I think we're going to run out of time here in just a minute. From a new market tax credit perspective, as long as you're in a qualified census tract, the community benefits in the story that you have would be a very strong story. The only caveat I'd say from the business side is you'd have to prove out that you have some way to sell and to partner with those individuals or those organizations that are going to buy your product at the end of the day. This is not a new business. It's very proven out, but you'd need to be able to show that you have from A to Z, you have a full line of business opportunities throughout.
Thank you.
Yeah, Veronica, I think from a lending perspective, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, I would say it sounds like a great business model. Definitely would be interested in chatting with you about it more. It may be able to qualify for some of the SBA guarantee programs. If it's going to be in the Phoenix area, could also possibly be BIA eligible, but have to know more about the actual, like Brian said, A to Z details of the business to see what it could qualify for.
Thank you for that question, John. We do have one more question that we can take. This is from Anne. Do you have a breakdown of what types of businesses customers of NAB are engaged by region or state?
Not that I could name off the view right now, but I could tell you that over 90% of our commercial loan portfolio is lending to tribes or tribal enterprises or native owned businesses. So earlier in my presentation, when I showed the loan breakdown by state, almost all of that is lending in Indian country.
All right, so we're at the end of the webinar here, and if you have any questions, here's the contact information, and you will all receive the PowerPoint presentation with Veronica and Brian's contact information as well. Please visit our website. We do have our webinar webpage where you can see and view all the recorded webinars from the past and previous, and of course, what's to come. If you are not a member of IANTA and would like to become a member, please visit our website at www.ianta.org, and we hope to see you soon. Again, thank you, Veronica and Brian, for taking the time today to present, and we wish you well, and we wish all the tribes much success. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.